Hello everyone, welcome to an analysis of dance where we discuss the movements and debuts of the Billboard Hot Dance Charts in immaculate detail, with in-depth reviews of each debut each week. Now this week does feel like a cool down, and that's weird saying that considering we actually got a lot happening here. I mean, 2 debuts in the top 10, a lot of likely big movements coming through next week, and even if there's a low number of debuts, the amount of movements are showing some real promise going into this year, but really, again, it doesn't feel like it's as eventful as it could be, and even with those top 10 debuts, I don't see them lasting next week, so yeah, it's going to be interesting. Hell, that might even start with the top 10, with our number 1 being Houdini by Dua Lipa. Now, I don't really see this lasting at number 1, at least for next week, considering Ariana Grande's album just came out, but still, in the long run, I see this being the biggest dance song of the year. It's got streaming, it's got radio support, even if that is starting to fall back a little bit, and sales are great too, so yeah, this is going to stick around. But also, let's consider Yes and by Ariana Grande at number 2. Now, I do expect this to go to number 1 next week, considering the album will boost the streaming and sales, but it's worth noting that the radio is not really picking up on this at all, and considering that next week there's going to be a number 1 debut from that same album on the Hot 100 that could potentially get pushed as a single, I'm a little worried that they might rotate this out and throw it out really quickly, considering it doesn't sound like anything else on the album either. But the interesting case behind these two is Training Season by Dua Lipa at number 3, where even if it is a bit slow to get going on radio and streaming, considering Houdini is still charting there, it's still got a little bit of momentum going. I can see this rebounding soon. And more importantly, it overtook Strangers by Kenya Grace at number 4. Now this isn't really surprising considering streaming starting to rotate out, and when the radio throws you out immediately, I'm not exactly surprised there, but hey, it had a really good run anyways, I'm not exactly complaining. But then there's also Murder on the Dance Floor by Sophie Ellis-Bextor at number 5, and really I expect this to rebound over Strangers in the next couple of weeks, considering it's still got radio support and streaming starting to rebound. Good. Sadly, that also looks like it's going to be the case for Contigo by Karol G and Tiesto at number 6, where even if radio is mercifully slow to get on board, streaming rebounded. Great, this is actually going to stick around. Lovely. But now there's the interesting case, and one I really do not see lasting at all. Debuting at number 7, Von Dutch by Charli XCX. Now, I'm not really surprised, considering the streaming has always been good for Charli XCX. She's got a really dedicated fan base, but it's worth noting that there's no radio push for this at all. It only got here off massive streaming, and considering how her last top 10 debut turned out, yeah, I don't expect this to last. But for now, it knocked down Whatever by Kygo and Ava Max to number 8, but this doesn't really surprise me considering streaming's starting to fall back, and radio is still not on board with this, which is weird for these two. It should have been a much easier sell than what it was. Unfortunately, that leads us right into our next top 10 debut at number 9, Lighter by Galantis, David Guetta, and 5 Seconds of Summer. Now, sadly, I did predict this, considering even despite their awful past year, Galantis still has an audience, and with the combination of David Guetta and 5 Seconds of Summer, who are still modestly popular, this wasn't a huge surprise that they rebounded with this. And hey, why not strike twice, considering Heartbreak Anthem was big one time, right? Yeah, we'll get to it later on. But what's more shocking for me is Shiver by John Summer and Hayler is still somehow in the top 10 at number 10, where the streaming is absolutely big on this one, and with small support on radio, it might actually stick around. That's really good to see. But what isn't lasting are our falls and fall-offs, where honestly I'm not exactly upset by what we lost here. Yes, I did grow a fair bit on Tell It To My Heart by Cash Cash and Taylor Dane, and I've always found Fashion by Brittany Manson really damn solid, but if they're going to take out Stuck Inside by Black Griffin, Basic, The Living Tombstone, Kevin Foster, and Denied a year in list spots, that is absolutely fine by me, especially with those first two actually getting their year in list spot. Good. But honestly, looking at falls, a lot of these really suck. I mean, yes, it does suck a little bit that Dance You Out of My Head by the late Kat Janice expectedly fell back to 20 as the sales fell back a little bit. But man, I really could not complain about these falls otherwise. I mean, when the best of them is Last of Us by Griffin and Rita Ora continuing to flop down to 46, that's not really a good sign. But alongside that, we also saw Dreaming by Marshmello, Pink and Sting continuing to exit naturally at 37, as it likely will be gone next week, thank God. And also Vocation by Azuna and David Guetta is exiting naturally at 36. I mean, hey, it's a decent song, but I have not cared about it at all since I first reviewed it. Finally, that leaves Down by Jason Derulo and David Guetta continuing to live up to its title down to 30 as no one gives a shit. And most pleasingly for me, the Odacore remix of Hypnotic Data by Odatari is continuing to underperform at 44. I mean, I can't really complain that this is finally getting rotated out. It should not be charting at all. But even better, when you look at what came back and actually jumped to replace these, this is an absolutely great list for me. week. I mean, we had two fantastic songs in our comebacks this week, with the most pleasing being Body Moving by Lisa Rose and Calvin Harris finally getting a bit of momentum at 43, where it looks like radio has gotten on board with this in a big way, and really I expect the streaming to get back on board with this. Good. But also notably, 10 by Fred Again and Josie at 49, where it likely got a big boost on the streaming thanks to Stay In It by Fred Again, Lil Yachty and Omono, also in our jump surging up to 12. And really I can't complain that both of these are sticking around, they're both excellent songs. Even better, we had two songs actually jump alongside this, with Paranoia by Ken Tenchi finally getting a bit of momentum at 38 after its return last week. Sorry for missing it, it just kind of slipped my mind. And thankfully, One Night All Night by Justice and Tame Impala rebounded up to 29. This is actually going to stick around too, that's great. But again, only 5 debuts this week. Let's start off with something weird with number 41, Patadas the Ahogado HUGEL Rework by HUGEL. Oh, guys, please, can we not let HUGEL become a thing again? I mean, I already was not a fan of this guy at all, especially with What the Fuck being one of the worst hits of the 2010s, and Stay High continues to get worse with every single listen. I have no idea why that even charted. So why the hell are we giving random Latin remixes this sort of momentum? For context, this song was originally by a Mexican urbano group called Latin Mafia, and it's actually a lot bigger than I expected. I mean, it's hit 90 million streams, which is really impressive considering I have not seen them chart at all. And honestly, the original is really rock solid. Just a really cute little Latin trap pop song that's got some nice twinkly synths and honestly sounds really damn adorable. I get why people like it. Now, I was dreading what HUGEL would do to this considering his history, and I'll give them credit that it's actually okay. I actually found this pretty damn decent. Now, it's not better than the original, mainly down to the groove feeling really dry and flat. It doesn't really have a whole lot going for it in terms of the melody, and really the groove just doesn't materialize at all. Honestly, this whole mix feels like it's missing something to really get going for me. It does feel a bit stagnant. But the twinkly ambient pads are actually really pretty, and I like that there's a lot of space on the vocals to give them some room to breathe. It does feel a lot more open than the original, which at least I can understand why they remixed it. I just wish that the production was a lot more interesting than what it was. I mean, it's in the brand of chill deep house that's hard to dislike. I'll actually give this credit, it's not as bad as I expected, which considering HUGEL's history, that's absolutely a compliment for me. So yeah, perfectly fine. I don't mind this at all. Number 39, Faster and Harder by Barely Human. Every day I go hard, riding in my flight car, lost in that VA, songs on replay, spinning like a DJ, make you look. Are we seriously still doing this? Look, I feel like Barely Human's hit-making career is pretty much done at this point. I mean, after that EP completely flopped and some of their hit-making potential was ruined on those new singles, but it feels weird that they're actually charting here at all. And it's really telling too, considering this debuted really low despite coming out in late February. So yeah, not really a good sign that it's actually going to stick around next week. Honestly though, I'm kind of conflicted because this might be the best of the charting songs that Barely Human has charted in recent memory. But even with that, I'm still not remotely impressed by this at all. I mean, it's not bad in terms of production. There is at least a little bit more of a budget here, and there's some mixing that's not actually as bad as usual from Barely Human. It kind of reminds me of the more polished, upbeat club dance music that was charting in the early 2010s, and while it does sound a little bit cheap as expected given the genre that it's replicating, it's still miles above what they were doing with Hands Up and XOXO Kisses Hugs. I'll give them that. The problem though is Barely Human themselves. I've never really liked their Valley Girl mixed with crunkcore aesthetic and their vibe and the vocals that really do not work for me and really hit the uncanny valley mold that I just do not like at all. And even if they do sound better here thanks to not having as many awful vocal effects, that might actually be worse when you look at the lyrics here. I mean, at first it's your standard party clubbing and flexing mode. It's not really all that unique or interesting for that sort of music. But then you get to the single verse here and really Barely Human goes for some cringeworthy punchlines that do not work at all. Including but not limited to Dancing Like Dina, you know, the 1980s hip-hop dance meme, calling you John Cena because the people can't see you when they're dancing at the club. Okay, that just does not work at all. Getting a strange addiction like TLC because that's actually something that people care about in 2024, which it isn't. And the final line of the verse being the absolute worst, feeling like suicidal idol, too much ecstasy. Okay, if you're going to that for your reference points, that is desperate beyond belief, and if you're going to reference a song that glorifies fucking that is not remotely okay, especially on a club song where that setting is a prime point for people to experience that sort of trauma. That is not remotely acceptable, and I have no reason why you're ever referencing it here. Okay, look, it's got halfway decent production, but when the lyrics and vocals are this absolutely awful, I have no reason to ever come back to this. Quite frankly, I'm being much nicer than I should with this song. This is not good at all. Skip it. Number 34, The Sound of Silence CYRIL remix by Disturbed.
Because a vision softly creeping left its scenes while I was sleeping.
I've been really dreading this since I saw it pop up on the Spotify global charts, and really I have no reason to expect anything good from this. So CYRIL is an Australian house producer who's been blowing up considerably recently off the back of some really admittedly mediocre and phoned in remixes. It's how a lot of big name artists actually get momentum going, and that's a little bit concerning for me. Now, I don't want to go too hard on this guy. He's been through a lot of really hard struggles in his life, going down to being completely broke, homeless, and almost taking his own life due to his financial difficulties. And really, I'm just happy that he's out of that pit and is actually able to make what he wants to make. That being said, I'm sorry, this remix is not good at all. For one, this is some of the worst issues of the original vocals I've seen in a charting remix in some time. I'm not even a really big fan of speeding up vocals in general in remixes. I just feel it's cheap and lazy. But here, Dave Draymond's vocals do not work at all when sped up. He's got a distinct hollering voice that gets completely muted by this remix, and especially in this case, considering he actually has some really nice long notes and really distinct hollering vocals that really work for the original cover. It's the reason why that particular version is a huge guilty pleasure of mine. But man, it's not like the production is able to save this either, where it goes from more of a muffled, dry piano house sound. And even if I do like the pianos and get why this sort of dry, progressive house sound would work to some people, for me it just sounds really cheap and doesn't really add much to the original song, which was way more powerful and deserved a way better remix beat than this. And look, I don't want to be too harsh on this guy considering the harsh circumstances he's been through in order to get here. I'm happy he's able to make a financial career out of this, but this remix is not really all that good at all. I'd personally pass on it. Number 9, Lighter by Galantis, David Guetta, and 5 Seconds of Summer. There's a reason why Galantis haven't charted in the last year. Quite frankly, the music's taken a fucking nosedive. And it sucks too, because I remember really standing up for these guys. I really like parts of Pharmacy and the Aviary even to this day, but their downfall has been absolutely painful to watch as someone who used to be a fan of them, especially with that fucking neurodivergent anthem. That's one of the most insulting things I've listened to in a long time and really made me give up all hope on these guys. And this, yeah, I'll keep it short, this sucked too. It just feels like Heartbreak Anthem, but with none of the really big atmosphere or personality that made that song at least passable for me, with much worse singers, which considering I'm not at all a fan of Little Mix, that is not a good thing at all. And this bland, clean Bandit ripoff where the violins sound really flat against a really boring mix that barely evolves for the drops and has absolutely no groove to speak of, and 5 Seconds of Summer utterly phoning it in. And really, it's a shame because I like these guys' vocals most of the time. This is not a good performance at all. I mean, it's not offensively awful. I've heard worse from all 3 acts involved, but again, I have no reason to expect this is actually going to stick around. Magic is not going to strike twice with these guys, let's be real. And finally, number 7, Von Dutch by Charli XCX. Oh, come on, Charli, please save this week. I really like In the City way more than even when I reviewed it, so I expected this would also be good too, right? No, it's not. I was disappointed by this too. I mean, at least it's not bad. I do like the melody and the synths. That kind of reminds me of Yeah Yeah by Body Rocks, and Charli XCX at least has some personality here. But besides that, this mixing and production is not remotely interesting. It feels so one-note and repetitive with a really flat percussion line that doesn't make any sort of groove materialize, and when nothing really evolves across the song's 3 minutes, I'm not exactly impressed by it at all. Especially when the sample becomes way more obvious with how bad the mixing is. Honestly, with this, I would rather just listen to the original or even the Dave AAoD remix that came out in 2017. Which, yeah, if your 2024 song is worse than a 2017 Dave AAoD song, that's not good at all. I'm not a fan of this at all. But that was the week, and oh my god, even despite some really promising movements, these debuts were not good across the board. I mean, I can't believe I'm saying saying this, but HUGEL might actually get the best of the week for his rework of Patadas de Ahogado, which really, even though it's not a great remix, it's at least decent, and I can at least see the appeal of it way more than everything else here. Speaking of which, for worst, oh god, there were some options to choose from, but for the worst, oh my god, there were some options here. So I'm gonna give a tie between Harder and Faster by Barely Human for some absolutely atrocious vocals and really some of the worst lyrics you can get on the charting song, alongside CYRIL's well-intentioned but ultimately really insufferable remix of The Sound of Silence by Disturbed. I'm sorry, but I really wanted to like that one way more than I did, and it ended up being a complete miss for me. Next week, god, I hope the quality is better, or at least something from that Martin Garrix EP is able to actually chart here. Besides that, it could be really dead. We'll have to hope it's at least better than this. But yeah, that's all for this episode of An Analysis of Dance. See you next time.